In the first stage of Arda, before the lands of Beleriand were lost to the sea, the northwestern lands of Dor-lómin and Brethil were populated by men of the House of Marak, also known as the House of Hador. Allies of the Noldor elves, they were staunch enemies of the Dark Lord Morgoth, who ruled from his fortress of Angband. After the death of his father, the lordship of the territory passed to the mighty warrior Galdor the Tall, who fathered two legendary heroes of men, naming them Húrin and Huor. In their youth, the brothers lived with their kinsmen in the forest of Brethil until joining a war party to battle the orcs encroaching on their lands. While the battle saw their forces victorious, Húrin and Huor were cut off from their allies, pushed back to the river Sirion, and might have been killed if not for the Vala Ulmo, who saw their plight and sent a mist to cover their escape. The eagles then descended and carried them to the safety of Gondolin, the secret city founded by the Noldor elves. King Turgon welcomed them as friends, and after swearing oaths to keep the city's location secret, the eagles returned them to Dor-lómin. Sometime later, their homeland fell under attack by the armies of Morgoth, leading to the death of Lord Galdor as he defended the mountains of Ered-wethrin. Húrin, now inheriting the lordship of Dor-lómin, took up the fight and drove them out of the area. As Húrin settled into his role as leader of the territory, his brother Huor was married and fathered a son named Tuor, who later married an elf maiden and fathered a line of half-elven heroes, which included Eärendil the Mariner, Elrond of Rivendell, and Elros of Númenor. Húrin was also wed and started a family, fathering a son, Túrin, and daughter, Urwin, later known as Lalaith. However, it was Huor's line that would continue beyond the first age, as the children of Húrin were fated for tragedy. When they were young, a terrible wind, known as the Evil Breath, was sent from Angband, carrying an illness which struck both of Húrin's children. The older boy, Túrin, lay in a fever and dark dream, but eventually recovered and awoke to learn that his beloved sister Urwin did not survive. Túrin was deeply affected by her loss, raising a hand towards Morgoth in the north, and crying out, "Marrer of Middle-earth, would that I might see you face to face, and mar you as my lord Fingolfin did." A few years later, the House of Hador was once again called to war, joining the Union of Maedhros, a great alliance of men, elves, and dwarves that rose to battle the armies of the Dark Lord Morgoth to retake the lands lost decades earlier in the Dagor Bragolach. Unfortunately, the Nirnaeth Arnoediad, as it became known, proved to be yet another defeat, as the alliance was betrayed by the Easterlings, also known as the Swarthy Men, following Ulfang the Accursed. During the battle, Húrin once again fought alongside his brother Huor, leading the men of Dor-lómin on behalf of their liege, King Fingon, High King of the Noldor Elves. Yet when the battle turned against them, the army was split and separated, resulting in the death of King Fingon, slain by Gothmog, Lord of the Balrogs. With Fingon dead, Húrin and Huor focused on ensuring the safety of King Turgon of Gondolin, who now inherited the title High King of the Noldor. And so the brothers took what remained of their army and formed a line at the Fen of Sedek, sacrificing themselves so the enemy army could not follow the retreating elves and discover the location of their secret city. Although the House of Hador fought valiantly and succeeded in saving the retreating army of the king, they were eventually overwhelmed and slaughtered, with Huor struck by an arrow through the eye. Even after all others were slain, Húrin continued cutting down orcs and trolls until grappled to the ground and taken prisoner by the enemy. Taking their captive to Angband, Húrin was tortured by Morgoth, who sought to learn the location of Gondolin. Yet despite the horrors inflicted upon him, the Lord of Dor-lómin would not break. And so Morgoth cursed the man and his family, seating him immovably on the mountain Thangorodrim, where he must watch from afar, helpless and bitter, as his loved ones suffered their tragic fates. Meanwhile, the Easterlings who betrayed the Union of Maedhros were given the lands of Hithlum, which included Dor-lómin, plundering and enslaving the last remnants of the House of Hador. In order to protect her son Túrin, Húrin's wife Morwen sent the boy to Doriath, where he was raised as the adopted son of King Thingol, while she remained in Dor-lómin, giving birth to her third child, Nienor. Fortunately, Húrin's wife and young daughter were spared suffering at the hands of the Easterlings, who largely left them in peace due to a rumor that stated Morwen was a powerful witch, allied with the elves. In Doriath, the boy Túrin grew to be a strong and courageous warrior, and at the age of 17, learned that his homeland of Hithlum had completely fallen to the Easterlings, receiving no more messages from his mother. Saddened saddened and angered by the fate of his kinsfolk, Húrin asked King Thingol for a place among his warriors so he might battle the armies of the Dark Lord. Granted the position, he was sent to the northern marches of Doriath to defend against orc war parties. Wearing the dragon helm of Dorlomin passed down through his family, Húrin brought such devastation upon his enemies, a rumor began to spread that the famous warrior Húrin Thalion had escaped from Angband. And while many came to love and admire Húrin, becoming a friend of Mablung the Heavy Hand and Beleg Strongbow, his rise in the court of Doriath made him an enemy of Seiros, counselor to the king, who spoke and thought ill of Húrin and his people. After a confrontation between them led Húrin to strike and bloody the elf, Seiros set about ambushing the man when he was alone in the forest. However, Húrin proved victorious in their battle, stripping the noble elf naked and chasing him through the woods as punishment for his insults. Unfortunately, Seiros lost his footing while running and fell to his doom. Although Húrin did not intend to kill him, he did not mourn the loss and refused to return and face the judgment of the king. Proud and fearless, Húrin left Doriath behind and took over leadership of a band of outlaws. Worried about his friend, Beleg Strongbow sought out Húrin and his companions, asking that he return to Doriath but was refused. And so the elf returned to King Thingol, asking permission to join Húrin's band of warriors. King Thingol allowed it and gifted Beleg the sword Anglakel, forged from the metal of a meteorite by master smith Eol the Dark Elf. Meanwhile, Húrin and his companions continued on, encountering a petty dwarf named Mim and forcing him to shelter them in his home of Aman-Rud. Yet one of Húrin's men shot an arrow that accidentally killed Mim's son, and so the dwarf held great hatred in his heart for these humans, despite their offer to pay a ransom for the death. Beleg soon joined them in Aman-Rud and fought at their side when Mim betrayed their location to the orcs, who slaughtered nearly all the outlaws and captured Húrin. However, Beleg survived the massacre and followed the orcs, encountering an escaped prisoner from Angband along the way named Gwyndor. After helping him recover from his injuries, the two infiltrated an orc camp to find Húrin in a state of senseless stupor, having been tortured by the orcs during his captivity. Dragging him to a nearby thicket, Beleg pulled out his sword and started cutting loose his bonds, only to accidentally cut Húrin's foot, prompting him to roar awake and take the sword, killing Beleg, who he confused for one of his orc tormentors. When Húrin learned what he had done, he nearly went mad from his grief, but Gwyndor stayed by his side and helped him reach the elven city of Nargothrond, where he lived in peace for a time, reforging Anglakel into a new black-bladed sword he named Gurthang. Love fantasy and sci-fi? Click on the link in the description box to check out tblocks.com, where you can sign up for a monthly subscription service, which brings you an authentic, officially licensed shirt every month from some of their great partners like Marvel, Star Wars, DC Comics, and more. If interested, be sure to use the promo code CivilizationTBX for 10% off your order. A special thanks to all those who contribute to CivilizationEx, like Caesar the Salad, Jake the Red Fury, and Arhael the Silent Blade. If you would like to help CivilizationEx, click on the Patreon link, and please be sure to like and subscribe, and click on the links to see more.